Ready? Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srimad Bhagvatam Granthraja Ki Jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so today we're going to continue in Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 6, Chapter 3, verse number 19. And we're just going to do two verses today because these are two really important verses. Both of these verses are spoken about often by Srila Prabhupada. And it's important that we learn them and always keep them in our mind. So, verse number 19. Dharmam tu shakshat bhagavat pranitam navai vidurishayo napi deva nasida mukya asura manusya kuto nuvidya daracharanadaya. And translation. Real religious principles are enacted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although fully situated in the mode of goodness, even the great rishis, who occupy the topmost planets, cannot ascertain the real religious principles, nor can the demigods or the leaders of Siddhaloka, to say nothing of the asuras, ordinary human beings, vidyadharas, and charanas. And this is a very important verse. What is it saying? Exactly. Well, it's saying basically that even the greatest sages in the universe cannot really ascertain or understand what real religious principles are. Nor can the demigods or the leaders of Siddhaloka, planet of perfected human beings. And what's to say of the asuras, ordinary human beings, vidyadharas, and charanas? That means that Krishna acts in very mysterious ways. And even highly educated people, even the most educated people in the material universe, do not really understand what are the real religious principles. That means that there are religious principles that are not the absolute truth. Okay, so now let's see what Prabhupada says in the purport. When challenged by the Vishnu Dutas to describe the principles of religion, the Yamadutas said, Veda pranihito dharma. The religious principles are the principles enacted in the Vedic literature. They did not know, however, that the Vedic literature contains ritualistic ceremonies that are not transcendental, but are meant to keep peace and order among materialistic persons in the material world. This is the key statement. Let me read that again. When challenged by the Vishnu Dutas to describe the principles of religion, the Yamadutas said, Veda pranihito dharmaha. The religious principles are the principles enacted in the Vedic literature. They did not know, however, that the Vedic literature contains ritualistic ceremonies that are not transcendental, but are meant to keep peace and order among materialistic persons in the material world. Real religious principles are nishtraigunya, above the three modes of material nature, or transcendental. Now, what does this mean exactly? Well, this is explained by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. He says, second chapter, verse number 20. One second. Verse number 45. So this is your homework for tomorrow. I want you to read second chapter, verse number 45, and explain how it corroborates. It's a good word. corroborate. Learn this word, corroborates. Corroborates what we just read. That is, they did not know, however, that the Vedic literature contains ritualistic ceremonies that are not transcendental, but are meant to keep peace and order among materialistic persons in the material world. Real religious principles are nishtraigunya, above the three modes of material nature, or transcendental. So what does this verse say? Second chapter, 45th verse. Traigunya vishaya veda nishtraigunya bhavarjana. Nirdvandva nityasatvaso niryoga shema atmavan. Very important verse in Bhagavad Gita, just like this verse today. Sixth canto, chapter 3, verse number 19. So, 245 translation says, the Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the three modes of material nature, O Arjuna. Become transcendental to these three modes. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. Okay. So, the Vedas are vast. So what part of the Vedas is Krishna referring to? It's called the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. So you have the original four Vedas. The Rig Veda and Yajur Veda and Sama Veda and then Yajur Veda and then Atharva Veda. So the Rig Veda indicates who you should offer the sacrifices to, or yagyas. So it's not clear that it should only be to Krishna, because it names Brahma and Chandra and Varuna, all these different demigods that should be offered oblations or offerings. So, therefore, there's some confusion who is the ultimate beneficiary of all Vedas. Although in the Rig Veda it says, Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam Sadapasyanti Surayo Divivachaksa Atatam Tat Vipasno Vipanyavo, which says that all the demigods offer their respect and homage at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So that indicates that even though you're offering, it's recommended in the Rig Veda to offer yajna to the demigods, but the demigods, their real purpose is serving the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu or Krishna. So, if you read the four Vedas, especially Rig Veda and then Sama Veda, which explains the mantras to be said to the different demigods to make offerings to them, and then the Yajurveda, very detailed explanations of how to make the fire yajna, what kind of fire, and so forth. And then Atharva Veda, which gives supplementary information that you should know to do these sacrifices properly. So, you read the four Vedas, but you're not really sure who's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's what happens. However, the ritualistic performances that are recommended in those four Vedas does exactly what is said here. Although they're not transcendental, but they're meant to keep peace and order among materialistic persons in the material world. So let's read the purport to 245 now. And it says, purport, all material activities involve actions and reactions in the three modes of material nature. They are meant for fruitive results, meaning material results, which cause bondage in the material world. So if you do these type of sacrifices, you'll remain in the material world. They do not liberate you. But they sort of guarantee a peaceful and prosperous material life, orderly material life. The Vedas deal mostly with fruitive activities to gradually elevate the general public from the field of sense gratification to a position on the transcendental plane. So that's the goal of these materialistic yajnas, to wean people off attachment to materialism and get them adjusted to transcendental life. But if you have self-interested brahmanas who perform these sacrifices, they don't explain that. Therefore, people remain stuck in the cycle of doing materialistic yajnas. They might even go up to the point of being always in the mode of goodness, but they will not be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. Then it says, Arjuna, as a student and friend of Lord Krishna, is advised to raise himself to the transcendental position of Vedanta philosophy, where in the beginning there is Brahma Jigyasa, or questions on the supreme transcendence. All the living entities who are in the material world are struggling very hard for existence. Why are they struggling hard for existence? Because they come to the material world in order to dominate and control some part of material nature and other materialistic people. Control them, exploit them. But those other materialistic people are also trying to control and exploit other people and material assets. So this means that two people want the same thing at the same time for different reasons. So therefore, there's going to be a struggle. There's going to be competition. And survival of the fittest. The strongest person will win, and somebody will lose. That's called struggle for existence. You can't avoid it in the material world unless you're in a society of Krishna conscious, genuine Krishna conscious people, where there's no longer this vicious competition, but everyone is well-wishing everybody else. And so they all get along, or everybody gets along as long as they're all serving Krishna. But when you serve yourself, then there's going to be a struggle, because everyone's serving themselves, means they're competing with everybody else. So that it causes this struggle for existence. As long as the idea is in the mind that I want to be the controller and enjoyer in the material world. So, Arjuna, as a student and friend of Lord Krishna, is advised by Lord Krishna himself to raise himself to the transcendental position of Vedanta philosophy. Vedanta, Veda-anta means the end or the goal of all Vedic philosophy, and that is Vedaischa sarvaraham eva vedya, to know Krishna, and to know him by engaging in his service, serving him without any material attachments, only to please the Lord. Then he reveals himself to the devotee, and the devotee goes back to Godhead and solves the problem of birth, death, old age, and disease, no longer having a necessity for a material body. Now the devotee has pure spiritual body, which is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge, and he's in the spiritual, and he attains the spiritual world where there's liberated souls and there's Krishna. All the living entities who are in the material world are struggling very hard for existence. For them, the Lord, after creation of the material world, gave the Vedic wisdom advising how to live and get rid of the material entanglement. When the activities for sense gratification, namely the Karma Kanda chapter, are finished, then the chance for spiritual realization is offered in the form of the Upanishads, which are part of different Vedas, as the Bhagavad Gita is a part of the fifth Veda, namely Mahabharata. The Upanishads mark the beginning of transition life, or transcendental life. How do you become, how do you transfer from being entrapped in this body and thinking that sense gratification is the goal of life, to using the body and everything else in creation for the service of Krishna, becoming totally detached from sense gratification and misusing the body for sense gratification. And then that spiritualizes one's intelligence, mind, and senses, and therefore you become totally fixed on pleasing Krishna. When the activities for sense gratification, namely the Karma Kanda chapter, are finished, then the chance for spiritual realization is offered in the form of the Upanishads, which are part of different Vedas, as the Bhagavad Gita is a part of the fifth Veda, namely the Mahabharata. The Upanishads mark the beginning of transcendental life. So, Upanishad, coming closer to Krishna, is the meaning of Upanishad. Upanishad, coming closer to Krishna, by having some philosophical understanding of who Krishna is and how he's a unique person in the universe and the only creator of everything that we see. As long as the material body exists, there are actions and reactions in the material modes. One has to learn tolerance in the face of dualities, such as happiness and distress and cold and warmth. And by nourishing such, by tolerating such dualities, become free from anxieties regarding gain and safety. So this gain and safety is a very important point. Gain means making money, and safety means protecting the money that you make and growing it. Because money is the way that you can have sustained sense gratification. But it's going to be temporary because the body is temporary. Therefore, everyone is ultimately defeated in their attempt to have permanent sense gratification. So it says, as long as the material body exists, there are actions and reactions in the material modes. One has to learn tolerance in the face of dualities such as happiness and distress, or cold and warmth, and by tolerating such dualities become free from anxieties regarding gain and loss. This transcendental position is achieved in full in Krishna consciousness, when one is fully dependent on the goodwill of Krishna, So one becomes tolerant because they have complete faith that Krishna will protect me, and he's a good, and he has goodwill. He's my best well-wisher. Therefore, I have nothing to worry about. I will simply continue in pure devotional service, and Krishna will reward me by protecting me and taking me back to Godhead. Haribol. So that's this verse, which explains in depth this purport today. So, the Yamadutas did not know these transcendental religious principles. That is, acting above or free of the three modes of material nature by using everything in Krishna's service and learning how to use everything in Krishna's service by accepting bona fide Shiksha and Diksha gurus. The Yamadutas did not know these transcendental religious principles, and therefore, what is the transcendental religious principle? It is the following. You can use mundane material things and dovetail them to the service of Krishna, and then those things and the service become transcendental. Just like you can buy some, you can come to our farm and buy dhanya or fresh coriander leaves, and pudina, fresh spearmint leaves, and fresh mustard leaves, and fresh spinach. All those things are growing now, they're ready, and we're picking them. And then come home and cook them and offer them to Krishna. So you took these mundane things, spinach and coriander leaves and spearmint leaves and mustard leaves, and you made it sabji, and then you offered it to Krishna. And if Krishna accepts the offering, all of a sudden these things become, which are mundane material things, they become spiritual. And then by respecting prasadam, that purifies your intelligence and your mind, and you become spiritual minded. Okay, so this is the process of transforming ordinary material things into spiritual reality. That's what Krishna consciousness movement is all about. So the Yamadutas did not know this. They didn't realize that simply by chanting Hare Krishna without any material motive will purify you of all sins committed if you chant even once sincerely without any material motive behind it. So, and even if you do it accidentally, as Ajamil did, he did it accidentally. Well, he was doing it all the time because he named his son Narayana, but he didn't mean Narayana in the spiritual world, he meant Narayana, his son. But the holy name acted, even though he misused it, but still, the holy name of the Lord, like Narayana, is absolute. So whether you understand it or you don't understand it, if you say it without any material motive, it acts and purifies you of all sinful reactions. It makes you qualified to be engaged in devotional service. Indeed, there's a group of men in India. So materialistic persons who attach all their faith to the Vedic rituals are described in Bhagavad Gita 2:42, wherein Krishna says, Vedavada rata partha nanyat astiti vadinai. So your homework previous weeks was to explain what is a Vedavada rata. These are people who study the Vedas, but misinterpret them to think that the goal of the Vedas is to have prosperous and happy material sense gratification in the material world. So they misuse the Vedas and the Vedic knowledge for sense gratification. Indeed, there's a group of men in India who are very fond of the Vedic rituals, not understanding the meaning of these rituals, which are intended to elevate one gradually to the transcendental platform of knowing Krishna. Vedaishta sarver aham eva vedya. That's 15th chapter, 15th verse. Those who do not know this principle, but who simply attach their faith to the Vedic rituals, are called Veda Vadarata. They misinterpret the Vedas and use the Karmakanda section simply for sense gratification. Herein it is stated that the real religious principle is that which is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That principle is stated in Bhagavad Gita, Sarvadharman Prityaja Mamekam Saranam Vraja. One should give up all other duties and surrender unto the lotus feet of Krishna. That is the real religious principle everyone should follow. Even though one follows the Vedic scriptures, one may not know the transcendental principle, for it is not known to everyone. To say nothing of human beings, even the demigods in the upper planetary systems are unaware of it. This transcendental religious principle must be understood from the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly or from his special representative as stated in the next verses. The special representative are the Mahajans. Okay, so if the demigods, who are all in the mode of goodness, on the upper planetary systems are unaware of real religious principles, what about us? And what about all the people who don't even follow Krishna consciousness? So the real religious principle is to use everything in the service of Krishna. Krishna is the Lord of everything, and everything should be used in the service of Krishna. That's what we should learn. In fact, when you walk into the temple, that saying that by Srila Prabhupada is right there that poster is right there at the entrance of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna has everything, and therefore everything should be used in the service of Krishna. That is Krishna consciousness. So, earth, water, fire, air, ether, of which everything in the material world is made of, the body, trees, cars, everything is made of these five great elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And then there's mind, intelligence, false ego, subtle senses. So all these things should be used in the service of Krishna. Then you can gradually be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. Okay, so your homework is to read 2nd chapter, 45th verse, to understand the Canto 6, Chapter 3, Text 19, and to understand what was the illusion or the misconception of the Yamadutas. And they said, when it came to understanding the principles of religion, Veda pranihito dharma. The religious principles are the principles enacted in the Vedic literature. Well, that's what's written in the Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, Atharva Veda, but actually, those things are not transcendental. Those type of rituals are not transcendental, but they do keep peace and order amongst materialistic persons in the material world. But the real religion is nistraigunya, above the three modes of material nature. And what's above them? Well, you have blood, and you get mucus, and you get a nose for that. So there's 7 or principles of Krishna consciousness that one must follow, and then there are so many rules and regulations. They're all meant to help us orient our consciousness to Krishna 24 hours a day. Okay. So, explain how the purport to 245 relates to this purport today of Canto 6, Chapter 3, Text 19. And then there are, again, it mentions Vedavadharata, the so-called followers of the Vedas, who say that there's nothing beyond the Vedic ceremonies. And then the Mayavadis. And then understanding chapter 15, verse 15, Vedaishcha sarvaham eva vedya, that Krishna is the ultimate goal of all Vedic knowledge. And to know him means you know the Vedas. The ultimate goal of Vedic knowledge is not performing ritual sacrifices for sense gratification, but that is given to help materialistic people gradually become elevated to the stage of Krishna consciousness. Okay? And then Sarvadharma Prityaja Satmami comes to the Nambraja. So this is real religious principle, to surrender completely to Krishna. And you surrender your words, your time, your intelligence, your mind, everything to serving Krishna and making that service better and better. Okay. So that's your homework for tomorrow. Are there any questions? This is a very important verse. We won't even cover the next verse. We'll keep that for tomorrow because that's just as important as this one. And obviously, this is beginning to speak to the 6 principles by which we can make always right decisions. What are they? 1, accept everything favorable for Krishna consciousness. 2, reject everything unfavorable for Krishna consciousness. 3, always remember Krishna. 4, never forget Krishna. And 5, when in doubt, ask Shiksha Diksha Gurus. And 6, you can make a copy of the purport to So 5, and then number 6, only perform acts that are favorable to Krishna consciousness. So that's a little bit different than accept everything favorable for Krishna consciousness. In other words, you should practically act for Krishna, or engage in Krishna's devotional service always, without any hiatus or any stoppage. So those are 6 principles by which you can always make right decisions in life. Accept everything favorable, reject everything for Krishna's service, reject everything unfavorable for Krishna's service. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. When in doubt, ask Shiksha Diksha the Gurus. And number 6, only engage in devotional service and nothing else throughout your whole life. Dovetail everything into devotional service. Okay, are there any questions? All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hari Bol. Thank you.